Commissioners meeting and move down to the public hearing, 505 public hearing, and we'll start with the item A, the budget resolution for the East Putnam Regional Water Fund. The resolution is on page 192 of your packet. And we'll all open the floor for discussion and or motion. Well, excuse me. Yes, I need to ask if anybody is in attendance that would like to speak for or against this particular resolution. Seeing none, I'll close the public comment at this time and ask for a motion of further discussion from the board. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Motion carries unanimously. Item B is a budget resolution on page 194 of your packet. Is there anybody in attendance from a public comment that would like to speak for or against? Seeing none, Chair will entertain a motion or further discussion.
Chairman, I'd like to move Resolution 2023-085 Miscellaneous Grant Fund and East Putnam Regional Water Fund.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? 4-1, motion passes. Next is item C, the budget resolution for the East Placer Water Fund and Miscellaneous Grants Fund on 196 of your packet. Is there anybody in attendance that would like to speak in favor or against? Seeing none, I'll close public comment, and the Chair will entertain a motion or further discussion.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move Resolution number 2023-086 Miscellaneous Grant Fund and East Putnam Water Fund.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Ayes have it. Motion carries unanimously. Now we're going to move to item D, which starts on 197 of your packet. And the resolution is on page 198 of your packet. Is there anybody in attendance today that would like to speak in favor or against? Okay, seeing none, I'll close public comment, and Chair will entertain further discussion or a motion.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So E and F, are we getting the cart before the horse on this? I'm trying to understand how this works. Can you explain that a little bit? I mean, it looks like we're setting the tentative budget, and then the next line we talk about the millage rate. So which one is it?
I believe you're on D at the
We're on
moment.
D.
Oh, okay, we're on D. Thank
Our
you.
mid-year true-up.
Since you're asking the question,
Yeah.
I think the same thing you did. I mean, usually you see millage set first and then the budget. Because the millage is
So E is informational only. When you get to F, the recommended actions are in that particular order.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I move Resolution 2023-087, a resolution of the Board of County Commissioners of Putnam County, Florida, amending the budget for fiscal year 2022-2023.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? This is basically the mid-year true-up is
Okay.
what this is. No further discussion. All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Ayes have it. Motion carries unanimously. Okay, so I guess the question here would be the previous question. Do we need to go to item F first?
Well, this is,
No, it's just like mentally, you set millage and then set budget, but the way Ms. Young has it set out, she's giving you an idea of the tentative budget, and if I misspeak, but then you actually have to set the proposed or max millage in the final action item for F.
Okay, so we can do E first. Okay, so we'll move to item E.
Mr. Chairman, I think there a little point of order here, a clarity. In our agenda item on 202 shows a number of 224, 383.70, but our agenda packet shows 244, 383. You see that, Julianne?
You're correct. It's going to be the, if you'll look at the bottom of page 204,
204?
yes, sir, where you see the total of all funds is 224, 383, 370.
Okay.
So the agenda cover sheet simply was typed incorrectly.
Okay.
Or the agenda,
And I do apologize, I should have brought that to your attention earlier.
224, 383.
Okay. Is there anybody in attendance that would like to speak for or against this particular item?
And again, this is informational purpose presentation only of your tentative budget. So your public hearing is actually on the next item. When you, by motion, recommended action 1 is where you would accept at the same time the proposed millage and tentative budget, and 2, by motion, set the date, time, and place for the tentative budget and the final budget hearings.
Okay, so,
So you will just move forward to the next item.
okay. Well, if there's no further discussion on that item, we'll move to item F, which is setting the proposed millages and the date, time, and place for the tentative and final budget hearings, starting on page 205 of your packet. And is there a resolution involved with this one? Item F just said it'd just be a motion setting those issues. I guess on the bottom of the agenda sheet would be the recommended action and the 2 motions that's requested today. Okay. Is there anybody in attendance that would like to speak in favor or against this particular item? Seeing no one, I'll close public comment on it, and the chair will entertain further discussion or a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we set our tentative millage rate at 8.999, 8.9999 for the general property tax millage, and the fire MSTU millage would be recommended to remain at 1.1 mils.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion?
Yeah, I would like discussion, please.
Okay.
To the budget officer, if we set this at 8.99, we can't go back up. Is that correct?
Correct.
Right. So I have some concerns at this rate. I certainly agree that we all need to be lowering our millage rate, and I know we talked about this at the last budget meeting, but I feel like we don't have any wiggle room. We haven't given ourselves any room for what is unpredictable, the unexpected expenditures that we've seen in the last year after post-COVID and all of those kind of things. You know, I understand that we don't want to grow government, and I understand that concept, but when the demand for services grows as the county grows, we either have to meet the demand or cut services. And to me, it's all about the services we provide to our citizens. I know Commissioner Pickens mentioned that on his at our last budget meeting, and I'm just really concerned that we haven't given ourselves any wiggle room. And this year we saw more than ever more departmental cost increases. And as Commissioner Harvey says, we don't know what we don't know. We don't know how much inflation is going to affect us in this next year. We don't know how much the cost of goods are going to go up. Our county is growing. Our services have to grow as our county grows. I'm just concerned we're not going to be able to meet the expected level of services our residents expect. We should all want to see our county improve. Studies show that people are less likely to want to live or do business in an area that lacks well-maintained essential infrastructure and services. This, at 8.99, we have not taken into account for any new positions. We have not accommodated a single department's request for staffing. We have not funded anything that's going to move our divisions forward, in my opinion. To me, we have to plan for the future of Putnam County, not just today. I feel like since I've been here, all I've seen is us put out fires, and we should be doing more than putting out fires. We should be planning for the future. And I just have the concern at 8.99, and I'd like to see it probably be at 9.1, and that's where I'm at. I can give several examples of, from one of them, for example, is Veteran Services. We've got 2 veteran service officers. They have a 3-week backlog. The demand for services for that area has grown, but we have not given them any extra support. not one administrative assistant or any other service officer, nothing. The level of service given to the citizens has declined, and I'm not okay with that. Same thing with Parks and Rec Department. We cut back their staff several years back, but we've never given them their staffing back, but the amount of participants that we're putting through our programs has continued to increase, and basically we're at capacity. You know, one of the things we talked about, I've talked about with staff, is the fact that our swim program got completely full this year, and that's great, but wouldn't it have been great if we could have had every child who wants to receive a swimming lesson get a swimming lesson? And if we're not doing that for our citizens, then to me, we're missing the boat. We see it in permitting. We have people that have certainly complained about permitting, public works, animal control, and we're not allowing any increase in those departments, but we're expecting our staff to continue to do more with less. And at some point, when does that rubber has to meet the road? So I'm not really, I'm not good at 8.99. That's where I'm at. I feel like 9.1 gives us a little bit of wiggle room for the area that we don't know. We don't know what's the unpredictable costs that we're going to have, and that's where I'm at.
Yeah, I appreciate your opinion, I truly do. But by the same token, we had a true-up today, our budget true-up that we just passed a few minutes ago that basically came in at just shy of $14 million of additional revenues for the true-up. On top of that, we had this year, we had an additional revenue of $3 million for a methodology change from a taxpayer. And so we're still getting $1 million more money than we would have got if we'd have kept the old rate without cutting any millage whatsoever before the $3 million basically fell out of the sky for us. So I understand that we could always use more positions and that we could always use more money to do something with. I understand that. But by the same token, if we hadn't had this additional methodology show up for the additional monies, we would have, and we didn't change the millage rate at all, we'd have still gotten $1 million less than what we're getting right now. To me, that $1 million is the wiggle room that we didn't have 3 weeks ago. So we do have some wiggle room. We got a balanced budget presented to us today using those, and my biggest concern is if we don't give this money back and we turn it into recurring expenses, then next year the first $3 million of it is going to go towards the recurring expenses. So I just think that the only way that you can reduce the millage rate is do it when you have circumstances that allow it. 2 years ago, we were able to reduce the millage rate because we had additional money show up at the end of the year that were not budgeted anywhere, and so we were able to use that towards a millage rate reduction. The year after that, which was 2 years ago, we had the same issue show up, and we were able to reduce the millage rate to some degree because of that. But we haven't had $3 million in additional revenues that we didn't even know were coming that showed up at the last minute after the budget was tentatively done, and that was able to let us shore up the budget. So even with all the fund, even by shoring up all of the funds that we shored up today with the true-up, the mid-year true-up on our budget, we still had $3 million additional dollars go into revenues on the true-up. So even with that being said, I do not believe we're putting the county in any jeopardy, any way, shape, or form by dropping the taxes. I think that if we took the complete rollback, which would be all the way back to 8.4 and change,
8.29, 87.
it was 8.4162 or something.
See it right there by your thumb.
8.2987, if we try to do that, that would be completely unrealistic because not only would we be operating at the same level with the same funds, we wouldn't have the money to pay for the increased things such as property insurance and all that. And that's why I went and sat down with the budget office and with budget officer and tried to come up with a list of all the different things where we made sure that we funded everything that came along. And on top of that, we had 700,000 additional dollars on top of that that we could use for other things. So I truly do not believe that this is putting the county in any kind of a bad place or a position, giving them $1 million more to spend than what they would have gotten if we hadn't found this additional revenues. Commissioner Adams, Act.
And one other thing not mentioned is we also carry a reserve that's 5 million over what we're required to. If you go by the 10%, if you go by the 16%, it's $1 million over. So if we got into an emergency situation, we could utilize that. So in that, not without even getting, I don't think there's any chance we get to the 10% if we keep the reserves at 11 point something, where we're starting. So at 20-some%. So I'm going to vote yes for the max millage at 8.9999, but I will not end up voting for the budget at the end of the system year for, because I think it should be,
Say that again, I
I
didn't
think
hear
it should be less than 8.999, and I've expressed that once we had the adjustment. You know, I had a number of 8.999, that was my goal based on the initial numbers. My numbers shifted back, obviously, because the numbers changed to 8.75, but that's neither here nor there. This is a step in the right direction. I think it's a good thing to do. And again, all we're doing today, right now, is setting the max millage rate, correct? So if that's setting the max, I'm for setting the max at 8.999.
Commissioner Harvey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Correct me if I'm wrong, administration, that if we find that during the year that we need more people, can we come back and amend our budget? And with the monies that we have left over, and I know we'd have to take it out of reserve, I understand that. But let's just say, for example, that Commissioner Wilkinson is right and we find more plans examiners and people that we need, we can always do that, can't we?
You can amend your budget mid-year at any time for any purpose by resolution by the board. When you begin discussing and making a mid-year budget amendment for a reoccurring expense, you have to think as to how you're going to then generate reoccurring revenues to cover that, unless it's going to be a finite in personnel, if you said you're going to have a temporary position. And then, of course, you could take it solely from reserves and not worry about the burden or the liability that would be coming in the following year.
But by the same token, you could also look at it like if you needed to increase veteran services by a person, or you needed to do something, that you could do that. And what you've basically done is you've taken existing reserves and you've made them reoccurring. So you have to realize that the first money that comes in next year on any increase is turned into recurring expenses on that item that you move forward out of reserves to move forward. That's why it's just not a good idea to use reserves for reoccurring expenses, because if you do that, then all you're doing is spending any increases for next year before they even come. And so that's the main reason that we can add a position if we need to, or we need to tweak it around. But a lot of times I've seen in the past where they're able to come up with other, like the building department right now and the permitting thing, they've started using outside plans examiners to try to speed that up. And if that programs ends up being successful, it's in their testing phase at the moment, I guess you'd call it, Julianne, your testing phase.
So we were only able to do that this year with attrition dollars. We do not have the expense for that next year unless we have attrition again. And if we do, then great.
But by the same token, I still believe that if you go to a contractor and you tell them it's going to cost $400 extra to have your plan review done in 2 weeks instead of 2 months, I'll bet you most everybody will pony up the check for the extra money where they can start the project. So we haven't got to that part of the program yet. We've discussed it, but we haven't got there yet. We've got to find out what the costs are and see how it works and what have you. So it's in the testing phase right now. So a lot of times there's other ways to skin the cat too, for lack of a better term. And I do believe there are, just like this year, we increased animal services by 3 positions about 2 meetings ago. Well, we did that this year out of existing attrition dollars, so we didn't have to spend any more. But we're well aware when we did that, the next year, that's gonna become recurring expense again, even though we started it out of this. So that means that the first monies for any increases next year will roll over into recurring dollars to pay for those positions. So we can do that, we just need to be aware that we're basically taking part of next year's increase that I feel confident we're going to have, and we're using that to not fund this year, but next year's budget increase out of those dollars. So,
Mr. Chairman,
yes,
I still have a few
Commissioner
more questions. Ms. Young, how many open positions do we have at the Building and Zoning Department that, if they were filled right now, and we haven't reduced those, have we? We still,
Currently, we've filled all the vacancies except for one.
okay. All right. But that's still budgeted for next year inside the 9.9, I mean, the
And
8.9.
I mean, to be fair, I'm hopeful that we're going to fill that vacancy within the next 30 days.
Okay. Yeah. Any other, do we have any openings in Parks and Rec?
We have none, we're full. All of the budgeted positions are filled
What
at this
about
time.
Public Works? Do we know that one, Ralphie?
7.
7. And that's already budgeted for the next fiscal year also then?
Yes.
So we're not cutting.
If the position is on the books, whether it's vacant at the time the budget is developed or or filled, we budget for that position because the assumption is that FTE is needed, whether or not they, personnel changes every day based on what happens in personnel, that the position need doesn't go away.
So my point is, and I understand Commissioner Wilkinson's concern, and I share the same on the veterans and others, but we could have a person that could come in for a year, we could pay them, a lot of government employees work on a contract type situation where they're here for a year or two and then that's it, and they know that, so we could find people like we are doing plans examine right now on a contract basis. We could find those, and those really wouldn't be reoccurring. We're trying to get caught up, and once we get caught up, we might be able to handle the load at that point.
The contract we have with the building division is a company that we outsource permitting to when our demand is greater than what we're able to service.
Right.
What you're talking about for veteran services is not a backlog. It is a steady increase we've
Okay.
seen over a number of years of continually need of our population who needs veteran services. So while you're 100% right, we can take from reserves if the board wants to establish that for 1 year we're going to have a higher service level. But I do not believe it's reasonable to tell you their expectation would be that you would resolve that backlog and then your current staffing levels would be able to maintain service at the same level.
Inside the 8.9999 is, and I believe the number is true, we have $1 million, could we go ahead and put another person at Veteran Services today and have that extra person budgeted? Or
No, sir, there is not dollars in the budget to do anything but sustain what we know today is an increase and the current levels of personnel. So remember, the board's a percent of that additional revenue. The constitutionals are a percent of that revenue. So the balanced budget, again, came out as we were directed, and it accounts for the known increases in contractual services, very little operational service increase if we had a division that we just absolutely knew. And then current personnel only at the personnel adjustment as agreed upon by the board and no other adjustments.
But we still have, on the amount of money at the current millage rate that the motion is for, we still have additional monies from the 20% of up to $700,000, and some of that money could become recurring expenses if we wanted to add a veteran services person.
Well, no, sir. When we talked originally, when we were projecting costs, you're right, we ended up with a cushion that was there. But when we balanced the budget, the actual costs even of the ones we projected, some of them were higher, some of them were a little lower, but I cannot tell you that there is an extra $700,000 sitting anywhere in that budget for reoccurring without cutting where we stand today.
Yeah, but you know, one of the things that we decided to do that I'm still completely in favor of is that we decided to go up to $15 minimum this year, where we could have left it at 13 and we'd have still been legal, because we went up faster than what we were needing to go. I'm not advocating that, but we also went up to a 15 minimum with a 5% pay increase to try to match what the state did, and we had the budgeted dollars to be able to do that. So with that being said, it's just a matter of where your priorities are and how you want to budget. I believe we're not hurting anybody. I really do, or I wouldn't propose this for a second. When I went after the 9.2 on our first budget hearing that we went after, I had absolutely resolved after sitting down with the budget office that I was not going to be able to do that. And even though that we had discussed doing it, I was going to come back to the board and tell them we can't do it at 9.2. We don't have the money. But then the $3 million came in of additional funds. That changed the whole ballgame, because we already had the budget that was set up to work, that could have worked at the 9.3 original without the additional tax dollars. So basically, would it be nice to have more money? Why, hell yeah, I'd love to win the lottery this week too. I'd have a nice motorhome drive around in, I'd do all this stuff. But it doesn't mean that I need all that stuff, or that I want it, I'd like to have it, but I think the county's moving forward. You know, I think Commissioner Harvey said last year, and it was the truest statement that I've ever heard, it's wonderful that we're able to talk about this, because 6 years ago, we were wondering how we were going to pay for these increases with declining revenues or even revenues, because there was zero ad valorem increase that year from the property appraisal office. So having these discussions versus that discussion is amazing. And so we've basically gone up, what, $25 million in the last three years or 4 years? I understand that it's not going to be enough, but how much is enough? We got $1 million more than what we would have got if we hadn't had this $3 million show up. $1 million more. So anyhow, Commissioner Adams-Act, did you have something?
No, I'll stop.
Okay, is there any further discussion on this issue?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, with the 3 million, there might be a possibility that that won't reoccur next year, is that correct? So
Yes, sir, and just to clarify language, because I know that the paper is here and I do want to make sure we communicate. We received 300 million more in assessed value. At the original millage, it would have generated 3 million. It doesn't generate 3 million as we move the ball. So to be fair, let's continue to talk in language that is going to be universal to no matter what the board does with the millage rate, which is the 300 million in assessed value. That came from a change in the taxpayer's methodology. What happened, and it is related to tangible, not real property. What happens next year, I cannot predict the future. Tangible property typically is volatile. It absolutely has a depreciation schedule, but also as tax incentives are discovered, especially when you receive a significant tax bill, then there potentially will be offsets.
But with that being said, if we take the whole $3 million that we're getting this year in additional revenues and we turn it into reoccurring expenses, and then it doesn't come next year, then what we've done is we've just turned that $3 million into recurring expenses, and that's the first $3 million of next year's money that comes in.
300,000 in assessed value, which will equate to whatever the mill ultimately it's set at.
Okay, we kind of touched on the point I was trying to make is that if it doesn't come in, then we're starting 300
Further in the
million and
hole.
it's further in the hole anyway.
Yep.
Right. So, correct me if I'm wrong, so with adding a position with reserves, because it's needed,
Yes, sir.
because we're not, I guess, able, and I'm saying this more on myself than anybody else, is identifying positions that need to be added, okay, is that, it's really no different than not getting this money. We're going to be behind the 8 ball either way, correct? See where I'm coming from?
I do, yes, sir.
I've said this each year. Each year is a budget challenge. We definitely could be talking about 6, 7 years ago, but that's over with. We've over that. At least we have some money to do. When we talked about the reduction in your sanitation charge, your garbage fee, I've not had one citizen tell me they appreciated that at all, not one. The amount of money citizens are going to get back, I hope they appreciate it. Where do you go with this? I am a little uncomfortable with this. To think that, Lord, we got reserves that we can use. And I ask this question, Julianne, I believe it was you and your staff and with, that determined that we needed some more people in animal control,
Yes, sir.
okay? It was justified from research you'd done on the number of calls that went through this board with no opposition whatsoever. So those will be funded in the following year, correct?
So when the board took that action, we incorporated them into the following
Okay.
budgets, yes.
All right. Actively in each department, is that able to be done? Because Putnam County is going to continue to grow.
Right.
And so we're going to have more permits coming in. I understand that we're using an outside source, and I don't disagree with that at all. But there's going to be a point where that may not work, and we need staff in-house. Is that a possibility, I guess?
So, yes, sir, it all depends on the board's direction. What I'm going to caution the board against is setting a precedence where we only take emergency reactive action. Because if each division has to hit panic mode to get the emergency allocation of a new position, then we, as a county, are always chasing from behind. And frankly, we as the board and as the budget office are completely working with moving targets. Because if we set that, what happens if one division has an emergency may not be a big deal. But if 7 divisions have an emergency, we have now a budget document that is all over the place. Not that we don't make adjustments all the time, we do, but we've compounded the reoccurring impact to next year's budget without impacting or having the ability to impact the reoccurring revenue generation for next year's budget. So those are things that I always caution against, is we want to go into the budget year having a plan that the board and administration and the budget office are confident in, so that when we have things that come along, the one-time expenditures is exactly why we have reserves. The one-time failures of a piece of equipment, the one-time situations that we come across, because we will not have to figure out how to generate the revenue to cover that the following year. Unfortunately, and it is just where we are, the expense side of the house, everything expense-wise is up, from personnel costs to what it costs me to attract a person, to train a person, and then to run the departments. Every single expenditure is up right now. it is a blessing that we were able to the values to grow so substantially, because in this inflationary time period where we find ourselves trying to operate, I do not know what we would have done if we did not have the growth in values. What I want to caution you against is taking the mindset that you know a reoccurring expenditure and we're just going to wait until we put it into the budget next year, because at some point we won't have the ability to generate the revenue for the amount of reoccurring expenditures we add throughout the year. And that would be my caution.
Well, I'm gonna have to agree to disagree with you on that, because I do believe we're gonna have an increase next year and ad valorem revenues
Well,
over
I don't
this
doubt we're
year.
going to have an increase. What I want us to be cautious about is outpacing our increase in values. I'm not saying we are. I'm saying that's where you have to think about to be responsibly in your budget document to ensure you're not going to have so many reoccurring expenditures.
I don't think we've reached that mass yet. Commissioner Adams Act.
I have another.
I tried.
had
Wait a minute, I'm sorry, he
go ahead.
wasn't done.
Sorry.
My
right, so
apologies,
if-
my
if I-
apologies, Commissioner.
That's fine, if I'm bringing this point in, and I'm not blaming anybody, I'm saying the situation that we're in is different than last year and different than the year before, is that we need to get to the point where those things are brought to us, and we feel this is what we need because of the increase in this or that, and most of it would be, with planning and zoning, would be the amount of permits. Animal control was the amount of calls that they have. Public Works would be the amount of calls, okay? Am I making sense here?
Yes, sir.
We need to get to that point where we're not talking about, we're putting out fires, and each one of us here have, definitely 5 years ago, we were just putting out a fire here and there, is to be able to head those off and have the staff in place. We need increases in staff in some areas. So with that, would feel better at a higher one. I'm going to support this and move it forward. But I think hopefully more discussions on our next year's budget will maybe not put us in this particular position where we're 100% agreement on how to move forward with this. That's all I got.
Okay. Is there any further discussion? Do you have something else, Commissioner?
I'll just say this. We're not giving anything back to the taxpayers. We're taking less. First of all, by definition, we're rolling back millage. We're not rolling back taxes. So the taxes are going to be higher, not lower. So overall, our tax base is going to be paying more. So we are not lowering taxes. We are lowering millage. I want to be clear on that. That's important because we keep saying we're giving back. We're just taking less. We could have taken a bigger chunk. We're just taking a littler chunk overall. So I just want to be clear on that. I'm not for taking bigger chunks at all. If I had my druthers, we'd roll back to the rollback rate, the trim notice. I said this year, because I've been adamant about not going above the trim, that I would split the difference and go half, and that's what I would lobby for, me as a commissioner, my individual. And I did that, and I'm not going to get that. So that's fine. I can live with that. But 8.99 is a lot better than 9.3 and gets us on the path getting towards where we can actually someday maybe lower the taxes based on the economy as it's going. At some point, we have to say, we keep talking about inflation, right? Inflation is like actually it's 4.9% or something right now. We're raising millage by 8.45%. So we're exceeding inflation by quite a bit. So at what point do we draw the line where we're going to continue as a county to exceed inflation with our raising our taxes? At what point do we stop? That's my real question, is where is that line? Do we tie it to GDP? Do we just say we need this? And I don't know. That's what frustrates me about the process, because I just don't think we talk about the numbers of the world, of the Florida, and then of our county. Florida, yes, has had greater inflation than the rest of the country, so it's actually 5.4 or something. But we're still outpacing that by 3%. That's good. If you're looking at just having more revenue, you're outpacing inflation, so you should be outpacing the cost increases.
Okay, if there's no further discussion, I'll go ahead and call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Ayes have it, motion carries unanimously.
Mr. Chairman, I move to set the date, time, and place for the tentative budget hearing as Tuesday, September 12th, 2023 at 5:05 in this boardroom, and set the date and time and place for the final budget hearing and adoption of the final budget and millage rate as Tuesday, September 26th, 2023 at 5:05 PM in this boardroom.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it, motion carries unanimously.
Your first motion did not include a motion to accept the tentative budget. Can I ask you to do that?
I'm sorry, would you say that again? I didn't wear my hearing aids this afternoon.
Your first motion did not include a motion to accept the tentative budget. Could you do that for me at this time?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we accept the tentative budget at $244,383,370.
Is that what you needed?
Yes, sir. To correct it, the budget number is 224,383,370.
Oh, I'm sorry, I got the, when you said something, I thought you had it the other way around. So 224?
Okay,
So we have it wrong two places on our packet.
It's just this part that's wrong. Your actual packet.
You look,
Yeah.
yeah.
The agenda's wrong on both spots.
Okay, let me get a second. Do I have a second?
Well, you
for the
can't get a
motion?
second right now. So I'm going to withdraw.
Oh, you're going to withdraw and redo it?
I'm going to do it right, yes.
Okay, no
Mr.
problem.
Chairman, I would like to set the tentative budget at $224,383,370.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to set the millage rate, or to set the
Tentative
tentative budget at 224,383,370. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, it's 4-1. Motion passes. Is there any further, that's all you needed today, right? Is there any further business to come before the Board of County Commissioners this afternoon? Hearing none, this meeting is adjourned.